The important point to note is that in AOP config, you have not mentioned which class is your primary concern. So everything that you define in your bean XML in this context becomes your primary concern, and then your advice becomes the weaving part. So when I say this, it will look for everything in this whole package. I can also define that, okay, in this whole project I can also define at the package level or at the class level or any Java class which starts with test. So those are the expression details we'll quickly see, but for now you need to understand that we are only defining at method level. So what it will do is it will scan every class in the project, and whichever method in the class matches this pattern will simply be executed. Because I am not saying which class, so it will do the same thing for the whole project. So in this application you have test method, and this will also be mapped test method, and because we have put star, this will also be mapped. So for example, let me not put the star here, and another example is let me not put the dot dot here, and let's run the application. So what do you expect? I don't expect anything to be weaved in the second application. Right? Second application is being executed, first method is executed, sys out, second method is nothing has been weaved. Why nothing has been weaved? This test method has a parameter and this test method has a star. So if I do a star, there'll be a perfect match for the second method. So this should be weaved, and there should be a pre and post executed on that. See, first is already running. There is no weaving on top of first method one because there is a parameter and we have not put a dot dot there. But the second method was a match because test method star was mentioned here. So before and after it was executed. What if we put a dot dot? It will now say anything which starts with test method and has a parameter. Now I'll expect all three methods to match, right? So everything is weaved. First method is matching already of the test application 1. Second method is also matching because it is a test method with a parameter, so the weaving is done. And the third method is also matching because it is test method, and because we have put star, so third is also mapped. Now what we have done is we have done this in Spring format. Let's quickly do it in annotation format. So we can do achieve exactly the same thing in annotation as well. So we have a sample advice. This sample advice, we are saying there are two advices instead of insert before and insert after. We name the advices logging advice and security advice. Your test applications remains the same. I've just extended the test application class for more methods. So first is test method 1, test random name, and test random name 2. So these are the parameters, these are the methods, that is the primary concern, that is your actual business logic, and this is the sample advice that you want to inject inside these classes. So you want to run before and after or different types of location, different point cuts, you want to add these. So this is the sample advice. Let's see how the weaving has happened. There you are not defining AOP config because we are saying that, okay, I don't want to define the details inside the XML. All I want is let the annotation take care of it. So for annotation, all I need to do is aspect J auto proxy. This will be doing the auto proxying of the application. The moment we define this, we don't need to define the XML AOP config detail itself, and we are defining the primary application of course the advice itself. Now see, where is the magic? We are doing everything here. Here we are saying who is aspect. If you want to map it with this piece of code, so we are saying aspect is sample advice class. This annotation comes here that this class is aspect. Then we are saying, okay, on this aspect there are there is one point cut called sample point cut, and there is a insert before and insert after. Same thing is happening here. After you do the execution, before you do the execution. And what is the point cut definition? Point cut definition and expression is this, that expression is execution of these type of methods. So in the sample advice we are saying that anything irrespective of what it returns, if a method has a test, it begins with test, has something associated with it, is passing some parameters, then you add the logging advice in that. Anything which has test in the method name, you add the logging advice after it. And this says anything which has test method, there is no star in it and there is no parameter in it, so it says anything in the test method, you attach security advice in it. Let's quickly run this. The only difference is that previously we saw the example using XML, now we are seeing the example using annotations. We have called the XML, we have called test method, we have called method 1 random name, because logging was supposed to match everywhere. So test method logging was executed, method 1 logging executed, logging. Just see the security was executed only before the first method. Let's see how and why. Star test method star, what will match here? Only the first method will match here. This method 1 won't match because we have not put a star here. If you put a star here and if you run this execution, you should see that security aspect is weaved into the two methods, the first method and the second method. Make sense? So we have just seen the two ways of doing the aspect oriented programming. We also need to understand how this is happening. How is the weaving happening? Weaving happens in two ways. The first is interface way and second is the inheritance way. Everything in AOP is done through the proxying. So proxying is an object created after applying advice to the target object. So when we combine advice and target object, you get a proxy. So this is the fundamental of AOP, that how exactly it runs. So there are two ways of doing it. One is via interfacing and another is via extending. A quick example will explain you how. Remember, I am not using Spring, I am just creating an equivalent piece of code. If you have an audit advice and if you have a factory service and if you have a client, so what you can do is, okay, I'll say factory service, give me the payment service. It will go inside the factory service. Because we have said payment service, so it will create a return new payment service and it will return you that object. In your class, you will get the payment service and you will call the get s1 method onto it, payment service called. I'll run this. What happened? Payment service constructor was called because I called this, and then get s1 was called. No problems here. This is exactly the same as saying get me the class path application context. This will give you the factory, and this line is exactly the same thing as defining the factory, and within factory you are saying context.getBean. Here you are saying factory.getBean. No differences. So I've just commented out the Spring bit and I'm just replacing it with the equivalent core Java code. Proxying happens as the first thing is extends. What is my core code? My core code, there are two services: payment service, which has a lot of methods, and statement service, which has a lot of methods. So what we are saying is, because this is our payment service, is our business logic, is our primary concern, so I'll create a proxy of our payment service, and whichever method needs overriding, what I'll do is I'll write that method, I'll weave the new, I'll call the audit advice, I'll call that method, and then I'll simply say super.getS1. What will happen? It will call the parent classes S1. Because I am a child class, I am extending payment service. So what I can do is I can weave the advice and then I can call the parent method. That's one way of weaving. And how we are doing it? We are doing it with the extends payment service. So what I can do is, instead of this, I'll call this. What will happen is I'll go to my proxy. So whenever in my client, if I say get me a proxy, so payment service will give you what? The factory will give you payment service proxy, and because it's a child class, it will be acceptable, right? So you'll get this, and then you will call S1. So what S1 will be called? Your proxy's S1 will be called, and this proxy will do what? It will first execute the audit advice and then call the S1 method. So instead of this, you have only seen the constructor and the get S1 called. Now you'll see slightly different. You will see the proxied weaving. See, both were called, both were instantiated. Proxies S1 was called, auditing, weaving was called, and finally. So this was our target. This is execute before, and this is the advices code, and this is the business logic code. So this is your primary, secondary concerned weaves inside the primary concern. This is one way of doing the weaving. You have this target class which is extended by the proxy class. This is the example. So another way of proxying is interface. Let's see the example. Here what we did was, payment services proxy was created and proxy extended the payment service. Instead of that, if we have a saving account which implements account, we'll create a saving accounts proxy. We have the core logic, we have an account interface which has a get details method. A saving account is interface which is implementing the get details method. This is the business logic, this is the primary concern, and what we want is, we want to weave something before and after it. So what is the weaving? The audit is the advice which we want to weave. Now we create a proxy. This proxy says, because service account is already implementing an interface, so this proxy will also implement the same interface. It will be executed and it will re-implement the getDetails method. In this point of time, what it will say is it will have the target object, the business logic which needs to be viewed as an instance variable, and it will call the get audit advice. It will first call the advice, and then it will call on the instance variable, it will call the actual method. Exactly the same thing. There is no difference in here, to be honest. What we are doing is we are doing this calling part inside the payment service proxy, because you are extending it, so this class is available as super. And here what you are doing is it is not extending it, it is implementing it, but this class has aggregated the saving account and then calling the aggregated account get details. Within factory service, what's happening? You are creating a saving account. Instead of saving account, your factory will be providing you a saving account proxy instance. In saving account proxy instance, you are injecting the saving account and then you are returning the proxy. Let's quickly run the application. You are saying give me the saving account, factory.getBeans saving account. Now it will return you proxy, and you don't have a problem because both are implementing. Saving proxy also implements accounts and saving account also implement accounts, and your calling is you are running on interface. So instead of that object, you will get this object, and then when you can call the get details, your accounts get detail will be called, and whose get detail will be called? Your proxy's get detail will be called, and that will be nothing but new advice.audit advice and saving accounts.get details. These two examples are simply to explain that how we can do the config in XML, how we can do the equivalent config using annotations, and how things are working internally, how the proxying is happening. This is where the magic is happening, and this tells you how that magic is happening. Right? So that's straightforward. This is how the whole AOP works. In the coming chapters, we'll see the further details of it, that how we can define the different terminologies. Like for example, what is advice, what is point cut. Point cut is a collection of different join points. When we weave advice of an aspect to the point cuts of a join point to a target object, it becomes proxy. This is a sentence I normally use to remember the AOP terminologies. It says that weaving is a process of the advice of an aspect to the target object at what location? Point cuts of a join point to create a proxy. So this is the term I normally use to remember the AOP terminologies. So aspect has an advice, has an implementation. This is the actual code primary concern. This is the secondary concern. You write an expression to define point cut. Whatever is the expression's evaluation are your join points. At all these join points, your weaving is happening. So we'll see some further details of it based on the topics we have discussed earlier, how this is happening, what are the different types of it, before, after exceptions, and we'll see different types of advices as well that we have before, after returning, after throwing, and around. We'll see associated examples with this. So see you in the next video.